Good evening, everybody. Tonight we're going to talk about Jewish holidays. We just finished the holiday of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is one of the holidays that was instituted by the rabbis. Actually, there's no biblical obligation in the Torah to keep it. That's the first one. The second holiday that was instituted by the rabbis is Purim. Everybody knows Purim. It's the holiday where Jews like to. We read the Megillah, the story of Mordecai and Esther, the Purim story everybody knows with Haman, and the Jews were saved at the end by Esther married the king, Ahasuerus, or known as Xerxes, and he didn't know she was Jewish, and he made Haman or Haman his right hand man. When Haman Haman was a Jew hater, or he hated the Jews. He was a very big anti-Semite, maybe the biggest anti-Semite. There was four or five men in the whole history of the Jewish people that wanted to destroy, that annihilate the Jewish people totally. The first one was Lavan, the father-in-law of Jacob, our forefather. The second one was Paro, or Pharaoh, when the Jews were in exile in Egypt. He tried to kill the Jewish for all the Jewish boys, throw them in the Nile River. The third one was Haman. He tried to kill all the Jews, everybody in one day, as it's written in the Megillah. The fourth one, or throughout the history, there's many more, like Hitler, and they say in the future there's going to be the last one. His name is going to be Gog, otherwise known as the apocalyptic war, Gog and Magog. Um, but the story of Purim is actually a very key story to the Jewish people, because when the Jews accepted the Torah at Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, and remember this, when they accepted the Torah, it wasn't just to Moses or to one man. This was a event. 600,000 men from the age of 20 to 60 witnessed God speaking to them. It wasn't one or two men. It was 600,000 men from the age of 20 to 60. That's besides from the women and children. So it was more than 2 million people over there witnessing God giving the Torah to the Jews, to them. So that's one of the main differences between the Jewish religion and all the other religions. Another thing is when the Jews accepted the Torah at Har Sinai, the the Midrash says, and Rashi also says, commentary on the Torah, that the Jews, God put the Jews under the mountain. God put the mountain on top of them and said, if you don't accept the Torah over here is going to be your grave. Which is, everybody asks the question, how could God give the Torah forcefully to the Jewish people? And the rabbi said, the Jews accepted the Torah forcefully. That's why throughout the ages they made so many sins. Both temples were destroyed because they never really accepted it out of love. In fact, the rabbis say that the reason why the first temple was destroyed was because the Jews never blessed the blessing of the Torah out of with their full heart. They never had true concentration or kavana because they never accepted it with a full heart. But there was a time when we did accept it with a full heart. That was the story of Purim. It says at the end of the Megillah that the Jews accepted upon themselves. I said, what did they accept upon themselves? The Bible teaches that they accepted the yoke of heaven with love after the story of Purim. Now, everybody knows God is very merciful. He loves his children, not just the Jews. He loves everybody. The Jewish religion, we hold that it's not just Jews have heaven. Everybody can have heaven. The Jewish people just have, an extra burden upon themselves. They have 613 commandments, but everybody else, they can also reach heaven. It's no problem. All they have to do is keep 7 laws, and most of the non-Jews or Gentiles, they keep most of them. The 7 are no killing, no stealing, no eating the animal, no ripping. Like you catch an animal, you can't rip off its limb while it's alive and eat it. You gotta kill the animal first. You gotta make a court system. You can't curse God or swear in His name. And most importantly, you gotta believe in the one and true God. That's it. That's all the laws there is. Oh, and also no sexual relations of the with the immediate family, or homosexuality. Those are the basic seven laws. You keep those straight to heaven. The Jewish people don't have just seven; they have 613. So it's not always a walk in the park, as they say. Now, when the story of Purim, everybody asks, how come God punished the Jews? You know, annihilation is not an easy thing for people to. Till today, people after 70 years of Holocaust, people always ask this one question: how could God cause the Holocaust to happen? 6 million Jews, totally. Maybe all the rabbis say when the Jew dies forcefully, if they did in the Holocaust, they go straight to heaven, straight to not even. It doesn't matter. They never kept Shabbos or put them still, and they go straight to heaven. They're considered martyrs, and but still, everybody asks this question: how come the Jews were so? How can God do this to his people? How can he do this to his people? And I always tell them, why is everybody so fixated specifically on the Holocaust? There were many times in Jewish history when we were almost annihilated, even more than in the time of the Holocaust. The rabbis say in the time of the Second Temple, the blood that filled Israel was knee high. They were walking the streets, and the blood got into their knees. Imagine the massacres that happened. And it wasn't just regular people that were killed. There were there's a story. 10 the greatest sages were killed. One of them, his name was Rabbi Hanania ben Tradion, one of the greatest sages. They wrapped him up with a Sefer Torah. A Sefer Torah is the Jewish, is the Old Testament. It's our Bible, or as I like to call it, the Torah is actually our instruction manual. It's very holy. If even one letter is missing in it or wrong, the whole thing is, we say in Hebrew, pasul. It can't use it. It's our holiest book. The Jewish people, our book, our Torah, we call it. It's not like any other book, because once a year we take this Sefer Torah and we dance with it. We're the only religion that dances with our book. It's amazing. It's an amazing scene. So they took this Sefer Torah and they wrapped it around this rabbi's body, Rabbi Hanan ben Tradion. They put on his heart wet wool so he'll die slowly, and they set him on fire. That's how he was killed, slowly, painfully, and burning. His student was next to him. He asked him, "Rabbi, what are you seeing right now?" If a person is burning alive with the most sacred book, the most sacred, I want to call it book. It's our life. It's the Jewish people's life, and slowly burning. What would he say at that moment? He wouldn't say anything. He would be screaming at the top of his lungs. The Talmud says he looked at his student and told him, "I see letters flying up into the sky in the Sefer Torah." That's what he was saying when he was dying. The executioner, when he saw how this rabbi was speaking while he was dying, he told the rabbi, and he was a Roman, he tells him, "Rabbi, if I take the wet wool from your heart and I make the fire higher, do I have a place in the world to come?" The rabbi tells him, "I promise you, if you take off this wet wool from my heart and make the fire faster, so that I will die easier death, I will take you specifically with me to the world to come. You don't have to worry about anything." The executioner did that, and right after that he threw himself into the fire. The Talmud says that he was one of the 4 Gentiles that have a share in the world to come. Specifically in those Romans, in that time, those Roman times, because they were very mean to the Jews. They used to, like I said, the streets was filled knee high with the Jewish blood. So, as I was saying, why do people take just the Holocaust as an example? The second temple, the first temple was a massacre. If anybody reads the Talmud, like no other. The so many they say that there was the general of the Babylonian army. His name was Nebuzaradan. He killed thousands upon even millions, if you count it all together, of Jewish children and priests and rabbis, the best of the best crop. He killed all of them. So you have to ask yourself the general question: how could God do this to us? Why? And back to the story of Purim. Why would God? Why would He? How you say? caused such kind of case where the Jews were faced with extinction. The first thing you have to say to yourself, once one rabbi, what's his name? I recommend everybody check him out. He passed away 10 years ago. Rav Nisini again. You can find his lectures on YouTube or on I forgot the website, but very amazing rabbi. He himself asked this question once. So he went to this great philosopher who was living in Israel at that time, and he asked him this question. And he tells him, the philosopher, he was himself a Holocaust survivor. I forgot his name. Maybe next time I'll say his name. I think it was Hugo something. He was Jewish. And the philosopher tells him, he tells the rabbi, he wasn't a rabbi at that time, he was a young boy. He says, Nisim, sit down. You know, in Israel it's very humid, very hot, and there's flies flying around. And at that moment there was a fly buzzing between this philosopher, this professor, and Nisim. And the philosopher tells Nisim, of Nisim again, and tells him, Nisim, this fly that's flying between us, if he had a human mind, would he be able to understand the words we're saying to each other right now? So, you know, space is relative. Rav Nissim tells him, of course not. Even though it seems like such a small space between us and the fly, but still the fly is so small, to him it could be like a million miles. He can never understand what we're saying right now. Even if he had ears or a mind to understand what we're saying. So the philosopher tells him, the same thing between us and God. We may think we're such intellectual, we're so smart, we go to college, we're so, how you say, advanced, but the amount of space, the amount of, it's astronomical, the distance between us and God. So first things first, we can never truly understand what God is. It's impossible for something that's finite to understand the infinite. There's nothing in this world that's truly whole. Only God is the only perfect thing. Even something that you say you would hold in your hands, a cup. You would say this cup is perfect, right? It holds the water. But if you put in front of this guy a golden cup, you would say this cup that you just said before, not perfect. It's not a golden cup. So everything relative to something better than it, it's not perfect. There's no such thing as something perfect in this world. So we can't truly understand what God is. Second thing, you have to understand that if you want to question God, first you have to look in the Bible, or I don't like to call it the Bible, I call it the Torah. It's not really a Bible. It's the Torah, an instruction manual. You gotta look at it and read the whole thing. What does God say over there? If you look in the book of Deuteronomy, and also in the book of Numbers, God says specifically over there, I'm picking you, the Jews, as my children. Of course, everybody is his children, all the nations of the world. But I'm picking you specifically to be the light unto the nations, as Isaiah said in his prophecy. And you have more of a burden, more of an obligation. And that means, I'll give you an example. Let's say a king had a son, and he also had a servant, and both of them stole. Who would get punished more, the prince or the servant? Obviously the prince. Why? Because the prince has more of an obligation. Everybody's going to say, look how the prince acts. What kind of upbringing did he have in the palace? The Jews get punished more because we are considered, we have more of an obligation. We need to be a light unto the nation. We have to act more properly. So, back to the story of Purim, the Jews were faced with extinction. And all the rabbis asked, specifically, what sin did they do? Because there's always supposed to be a sin that breaks the last straw that broke the camel's back. What was the sin that they did? The first, I'm reading from the book called, it's called Peninei Moadim, Al Pi Ben Ish Chai. This book was written by the great sage, 100 years, he passed away 110 years ago. His name was the Ben Ish Chai, or Rabbi Yosef Chaim, from Baghdad. He was the head of the Jewry, the Sephardic Jewry specifically. Almost every religious Jew knows who he is, for sure. And he writes over here that they asked this question to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Who is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? He was the author of the Zohar, and all the Kabbalah, all the mystical teachings. To this day, everything stems from him. He's like Moses in that sense, because the Torah has four how you say, four ways of looking at it. Has four ways to interpret it. The first way is pshat, the regular way. The second way is remez, it's like looking through hints in the Torah. The third way is derash, and the fourth way is sod. Sod is the secrets of the Torah. And Rav Shimon Bar Yochai was the one who revealed this. So it says over here that his students of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai asked him, why was the gzera, why was the decree on the Jews at that time for extinction? And he answered them. The reason was because in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, which was the Babylonian empire, the Jews bowed down to the Telem. The Telem was Nebuchadnezzar. He made a very big statue, and the statue, he told, since it was the greatest empire at that time, he called to all the nations to come and bow down to this idol. And the Jews back then were so afraid, because obviously a person who was faced with life and death, he was so he was so afraid. They were so afraid at that time. They were so afraid at that time that they all bowed down except for three men. Three men didn't bow down to the idol. Their names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. These three men, they were the leaders of the Jews at that time. When they didn't bow down, Nebuchadnezzar threw them in the fire, and miraculously they were saved. It's one of the great miracles in Jewish history. You guys could all find it in the book of Daniel. So all the Jews bowed down. So basically, almost all the Jews served idols, served the idol in that time. Even though it was by force, they served the idol. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, already from that time, it was decreed in heaven that the Jews would suffer a fate of extinction, because they had to give. There are three sins that a Jew, even he's faced to them, he has to kill himself and not do it. The first one is idol worship. The second one is killing another person, and the third one is immoral relations. Like let's say a person is married, and some guy comes up and says, "I want you to sleep with another woman, or else I'll kill you." A person has to kill himself and not do this sin. Or a person says to a man, "I want you to do homosexual relations." A person has to kill himself and not do such a thing. It's one of the three, we call the three cardinal sins. And so already from that time, the Jews it was decreed in heaven that they were going to face extinction. But God is merciful, and He waited. He waited many years, of Shimon Bar Yochai writes, till the time of Xerxes, or Ahasuerus as we call it. And it was in that time when God put His plan into fruition. Now the question is, why? Why did God wait until that time? The answer is very simple. God was waiting for the Jews to repent for what they did, even though it was by force. But we just said it's one of the three cardinal sins. But He waited all those years, almost 70 years. 70 years He waited for them to repent, and they didn't. But God still waited. And then, like we said, there's always has to be a sin that's the last straw. The last straw. The Megillah Esther writes over there that there was a big feast at that time. When Xerxes, Ahasuerus, when he got into power, he made this great feast. It lasted for, I think, 180 days. And he called all the people to come into this feast. And he called the Jews too. And the Jews all participated in this feast. And God was very angry. Why? Everybody participated except for one man. His name was Mordechai. And why was it so bad for the Jews to go into this feast? And I think this is the point of this whole topic. It's because the truth is there was no major sin they did over there. Why? Because what could be so wrong to come into a feast? Okay, so the biggest thing would be non-kosher food, right? Or the wine, getting too drunk, or I don't know, doing something stupid. But the rabbi said that Ahasuerus, he specifically made glad kosher food for the Jews to eat over there. So what could be so wrong already? The answer is Ahasuerus was very smart. He himself didn't like the Jews too much, and the food was glad kosher. The music wasn't I don't know, Everything seemed perfect, but there was one thing that was wrong. The waitresses serving the food weren't so properly dressed. The Jews started mingling in with their friends over there, with their neighbors. Assimilation started, and this was Ahasuerus' true plan: to bring in the Jews into this party, to show them everything is fine, everything is blood kosher food. The meat is the shochet, the man who's making this, the slaughterer. Everything perfect. What we call today the best of the best meat. That's the way he brought the Jews inside. But that was his plan. When he brought them inside, then the snake bit them. They fell into the trap. When God saw that, he said, now we're going to punish the Jews for what they did 70 years ago. He waited 70 years. But we see, even though the Jews were faced with extinction, at the end of the day, Mordecai, who was the head of the Sanhedrin, the head of the Jewish court at that time, got up. He called for the Jews to fast 3 days and 3 nights. All of them, in the whole world, they all fasted. God, with his infinite love and mercy, he forgave them. And instead of the Jews getting extinct, Haman and his 10 sons were killed. But not only that, the point, the main thing of this, the whole point of the Purim story was at the end of the day, they accepted the Torah from love. It wasn't by force anymore. It wasn't by force, it was by love. So it was like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Not only did they repent and they weren't killed, but the mistake they made all those years ago, 1,000 years ago at Mount Sinai, when God, it seemed, he forced them to accept the Torah. At this point, they accepted the Torah from love. And this is why this holiday, it was not written in the Torah, but it was instituted by the rabbis. But we still keep it until this day to remind all of us we have to keep the Torah from love. Thank you, everybody, for listening.